is our session 4 of Journey. And if you haven't had the book yet, or if this is your first class, do we have anybody for whom this is your first class in this? Thank you, Cheryl. Okay. So this is the typical words of Jesus. The good thing is that we're kind of treating every chapter separately, kind of not necessarily going in order in any one gospel, but rather choosing among some of the most challenging stories and words of Jesus, following a book from Dr. Amy Jill Levine. And this is a picture of Amy Jill, if you haven't seen her before. But we are going into week 4, Nowhere Among the Gentiles. This might be one of the harder ones to kind of, when did Jesus say that? But we'll talk about that. Week 5 is the outer darkness, kind of Jesus' treatment of hell and understanding of it. And then week 6, your father, the devil. Resounding notes from this morning's sermon have been there. But let's start with some of these kind of opening thoughts to think about before we delve into some harder questions of sheep and shepherd. When we're talking about Jesus being one who directs us to go, I'm going to go ahead and use this since it's here. Might help some people. Jesus being one who directs us to shepherd, and that he is the good shepherd. There are other passages in the Bible. Why might sheep and shepherd imagery be common in the Bible? Any thoughts on that? There's no one right answer, just kind of, yes, Robbie.
It was a common thing people saw, so
yeah,
they
common
could
thing.
Relate to it.
Exactly, yeah. Common thing. What else?
Oh, it's like the 20 in Psalms. It's a real pastoral, it's the Lord is my shepherd, it's like
right,
normal.
Good normal. Okay, so it sounds normal to us now, yes, but we know Psalm 23 was around well before Jesus.
Exactly.
Yes. So some images that were long held in the Jewish tradition and perhaps others. What do you think this imagery of sheep and shepherd says about God and God's relationship to human beings?
Sheep are dumb.
The sheep are dumb, okay.
And we need a shepherd to guide us on the right path.
And we need a shepherd to guide us on the right path. I will fully admit that I was not raised in close proximity to sheep. Are any of you here raised with sheep? Yes, a couple nodding your heads. Okay, are sheep dumb?
Yeah.
They are. Oh, okay. Okay, so they will kind of do what you say, go where you lead them, get lost and not know how to find their own way.
Require border collies.
Require border collies.
Yeah.
Yes, so some border collies, some animals who are a little smarter than they are even.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is a challenging statement, I think, in some ways, from Amy Jill. She said congregations should not be sheep, docile, silent, unimaginative, unthinking. Congregations should be disciples. Do you agree with her? Why or why not? Partially. Okay. Do you want to say more about that, folks?
You want me to say more?
I love for you to say more.
Of course.
Words of wisdom.
I don't want to totally get rid of sheep. The imagery is good. Sheep are dependent, not dependent. I mean, I might be decently smart. I might have not necessarily always docile, but they're dependent. I like that imagery.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, that in some sense we should be dependent on God. Yeah. What else? Any other thoughts, Robbie?
I was thinking about the lost sheep.
Mm-hmm.
And is that the equivalent of kind of going rogue?
Going rogue.
When you go off on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And congregations are a gathering of worshiping people. So is there strength in being a gathering of worshiping people that you don't have when you go off half crazy and go rogue? I kind of think the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if that's part of you're not individual sheep, you're collective sheep.
Mm-hmm. So the flock imagery can be very helpful, right? Yes, and understanding how we're not good at being sheep all by ourselves, just like sheep aren't being good at being a sheep alone.
Then I think about that when you sing the Messiah, the all we like sheep,
Hmm.
I'm never quite fond of that. You know, it makes me feel like all we who have no brains and just follow along roadly. So there's a contrast there for me, but if you
Yes.
look on the upside of it, I guess it's their strength in numbers,
Mhm.
but everybody has to do their job.
Yes, strength in numbers. Yes, and kind of holding that image in some way, yes.
The sheep are herding animals. They need to be with somebody else. They need to be together, just like cows. You don't have one cow. Yeah, and horses, a lot of those plant eater kind of animals like to be in numbers because, for one thing, because predators, right? Okay, and they are, the border collie not only herds them in the direction they want you to go, but they also protect those sheep. Because that is a big deal, because sheep are very vulnerable to predators and can be attacked, and a pack of wolves
Okay.
can take the whole flock down.
Mhm. And we also know there's plenty of imagery about thieves and wolves and bad hired hands in the Bible, and you're right, that we can see those analogies in our own lives. Yes, Susan.
This is a funny aside. I have a friend that had 2 sheep because he didn't want to cut the grass, and he named them Lawn and Mower.
So sometimes sheep can help humans.
Yes.
Right, yes. There is definitely a mutuality too, even though we have shepherd and sheep.
Yeah.
Thank you. I like that, lawn and mower. Yes, too.
The next term, congregations should be disciples, I think is the reminder to remember who our shepherd is.
Mm,
And that it's not somebody else in the church telling us what we should think and not think, or do and not do.
mhm.
That it's Christ, that it's Jesus.
Yes.
And that role, Christ's role is teaching, but it's also protecting too.
Right.
Somewhere on a bookshelf in my house is a book called A Shepherd Looks at the 23rd Psalm. And I remember that because it went into detail describing how the shepherd's crook was used
Right. Mhm.
as, grab the sheep by the neck. If it gets too close to the water, it falls in and yank him out.
For our good.
Use
Yes.
it as a weapon, but also to make noise with it so that they would hear and know where their shepherd was.
Yes. So the trustworthiness of that shepherd and all the ways that shepherd works for our good. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, that'd be a good book to read. Yeah. Have you ever been part of a congregation that felt more like maybe the negative side of sheep? Kind of the docile sort of following, maybe not even discerning who the shepherd is. Yes.
Yeah, back in Massachusetts, when I was a young girl growing up, we went to a congregational, it was very, very old congregational church built in the 1700s.
Mm.
And I don't know if all congregational churches then were like this, but it was pretty fire and brimstone. And as I grew, it was just, this is where my family went, my friends went, we just stayed with it. But I remember being in confirmation class, there was a new assistant pastor. And we were talking about passage in the Bible that said, I'm really terribly messing this up. If you call someone a fool, you are doomed and going to hell. I don't know what the exact phrase is. And so all of us, teenagers are going, well, that can't be. And the pastor said, yes, it is. And they said, wait, what? And he said, if you have called someone a fool, you are doomed and going to hell. And they kept waiting for him to clarify unless or but.
Right.
There was no, he was firm on that. And it really disrupted the class. And somebody finally went to the head pastor and told him, and it turned out that this man was sent away from our church and was so they weren't that strict.
Wow.
But the attitude of all of us was, well, we've all done something like that. So what, there's no hope, we're doomed?
Yes, there's no hope after
We
sinning.
haven't really started our lives and it's all over. So that was a time I said, I probably won't stay with this church. But again, the pastor sent him away.
Right, but you point out well the damage that can be done by someone who is human, that speaks, with some authority, and how that can really hurt with a congregation. Yeah, I'm glad someone addressed it
Yes,
and responded.
I might have been very
No, that's good. Done.
I was involved with a church, and it seemed like the people who gave the most donations stirred up the most trouble. And we were divided. We were putting a building up, and the building committee, which I was on, the original contractor, bailed out and he wanted more money. So they asked me to get someone else. I got original quote they wanted to be at. And the people that gave more money were upset, and there was so much going back and forth, and it wasn't united in there. It's I give the most money. I want that guy to do it. I never saw so much bickering and fighting within a church.
Yes, when there's a power differential among the sheep. And
I ended up stepping out, and then the financial guy called me on the phone. He says, "You need to get back in." And 2 weeks later, he resigned.
No.
Here's your sign.
I've never seen anything, and the way I was treated when I went to church, some of them were giving me the woolly eye.
Oh, boy.
It was amazing. I'm giving the most amount of money here. I have a say in this. Well, then get on the committee.
There's a passage in Ezekiel about the
Yes.
strong sheep butting around the weaker sheep. Yes, yeah. Judy.
So I didn't even know that sheep were stupid. Thank you for telling me that.
Oh, you're welcome.
But I think I've shared before, I grew up Catholic, and at least in all the churches, Catholic churches that I went to, we were just kind of told what to do and what to believe and what to think. And it's only in the last 5 or 6 years since I became Presbyterian did I actually start to have questions. Like, I never grew up being told that Jesus had any brothers or sisters, because somehow I guess that was somehow like bad if he had like human brothers and sisters. I don't know. But what I'm saying, like, I totally relate to what she's saying. Like, but I think, to make the point of some other people that have said this, we need to be a group, and we need each other, and there's unity in numbers and all of that. But also, for me, I can't be that sheep that just blindly accepts what some other person tells me that I need to believe, and it's okay to question. And so that's how I'm also even finding, like, Jesus is a loving God. Like, those words, I hear them, but it's hard to believe that when you are instructed, like, you have to believe. And if you don't believe what we tell you, then you're bad. So, I mean, I'm a very, very much a child again, trying to find my faith like the young children of our congregation are doing now.
Right.
So maybe I need to go to Kids Connect. I mean, I'm not kidding you. I'm seriously not kidding you, because I think I'm really that far. Like, I'm not nearly where you guys are in your level of understanding, because I've been stifled for so many years. So I'm very grateful for all of this and for all of you for your insights. And I
Thanks
just
for sharing that, Judy.
Judy, thank you.
We're glad you're here.
I know. I know you're from Steve.
Let's see, I saw a hand with Pamela, and then we'll go back to Betsy.
Well, I think just exactly what she said, it just reminds me of the sermon today, but the idea that faith, it's not a continuous growth. There's knowing, unknowing, and then new knowing, as he said. And then the whole idea of like just renovations and rebuilding and, I just think of, the situations and just our journey through faith.
Right, right, yes.
Yes.
And God does sometimes jolt us, as Peter got jolted by Jesus' language, but also Jesus didn't give up on him. That wasn't their last story together, yeah. Thank you. Betsy.
I was just gonna say two things. First of all, my husband, was a minister, a Presbyterian minister, ordained from this church back when we were in the old building. So we had churches, and we had small churches. And they fought, the last one that we had fought over in Oregon. And there were 3 families involved in it that were controlling. And this is the way it was gonna be. And that's when David quit, because he was not gonna put up with that, because the sheep were getting pretty.
That's what I did. I moved over to another church. They needed 300,000.
Exactly.
The guy raised it up 300,000. I had a contractor for the original price they could only afford. And it was like, holy, don't, look what I did wrong.
Well, very good. Yeah, congregations that can decide we're just gonna get rid of our shepherd. And maybe there are some shepherds that don't need to be there anymore, but also they can kind of speak with, there's that thinking.
But there's
side
that,
of
there's
it.
that whole piece, okay, because and then eventually, you know what, everything that he said to do came to fruition under the next guy, and that was another thing. I guess we needed to step aside, and that was part of it, because it was focused on us and our family, which it was brutal. Second of all, you're what my husband used to call a baby Christian. You're learning in faith. And we will support you in whatever you need. And so there's so many opportunities here to learn and grow. So you're not apart from friends.
And you're also not alone. We do have other people who are kind of rebuilding in their faith or coming to faith for the first time. So we're glad for every kind of step of the way that you offer and are vulnerable with each other.
My sons, I was too afraid to say what Judy said, because that's why I shook her hand, because that's exactly, where I was.
Well, you don't see it here.
No.
You don't see it here.
This is sort of we connect for adults here.
We connect for adults.
And
I got it. I like that. Yes, yes.
I believe that we are not judged in comparison to anybody else. This person's here, this person's there.
Yeah.
I believe we are judged in comparison to ourselves of where we should be in comparison to ourselves, but not where I should be in comparison to Leah or Judy or anybody else.
Amen. Amen. Yes, grace abounds. Grace abounds. Robbie.
Amen.
Yes.
The other problem.
Robbie had. Oh, okay.
That's right, Ann can go.
The other problem with if congregations are sheep that just follow along, as you're expected to do in the Roman Catholic version of Christianity, people don't grow. Right? I mean, one of the reasons I think this is such a wonderful congregation is that we ask each other questions, we challenge one another, we challenge our faith, and it's been challenging our faith that we grow in our faith, I think, at least for me, because I'm learning.
Right.
Great teachers, some of them who are in this room.
Yes.
We learn from each other.
Right. Exercising the full self in the study and path of faith. I don't want to miss anyone who's joining us online. Any other comments from those who are at home or elsewhere? Okay. Well, we'll move on. This has been so rich. We haven't even gotten to the opening prayer yet.
Whoa.
Holding all this wisdom that you have already offered. Let us join together in our opening prayer. Will you join me? Strong and caring God, you carry us from our birth and guide us into truth all our days. Once again, we ask for your wisdom as we ask questions of the scripture, each other, and of you. Nourish us in this time of reading and discussion, that we may discern to whom you send us with good news of your realm. Amen. Nowhere among the Gentiles. This is the passage that inspires the heading of our session today. And it's a short passage, just a few lines. Would someone be willing to read Matthew 10, 5-7 aloud for us?
These 12, Jesus set out with the following instructions. Go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. As you go, proclaim the good news. The kingdom of heaven has come near.
Thank you. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
We have a second guiding passage. This happens 5 chapters later in the same gospel. So we were in Matthew 10. We're skipping to Matthew 15. This is a longer passage. Could I have 2 readers, one for the first slide and one for the second? Thank you, Susan and Judy. Okay.
Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon. But he did not answer her at all, and his disciples came and urged him, saying, Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us. He answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep, lost sheep of the house of Israel. But she came and knelt before him, saying, Lord, help me.
He answered, It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. She said, Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Then Jesus answered her, Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish. And her daughter was healed instantly.
Amen. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God.
So this story, this one of a piece of art depicting this passage of a Canaanite woman. And what might we know about a Canaanite woman just being labeled as such in the gospel? Anybody know why it would be important for us to know that she was a Canaanite woman?
She was a Gentile.
A Gentile, yes, thank you, Joni. Right, a Gentile, meaning we aren't sure what God, if any, she worshipped, but she would be easily identified as not Jewish, as from Cana, which was a region that they were, in, but not of the house of Israel. Why do you think Jesus does not immediately heal this woman's daughter as she begs him to? Go back to the passage. First, he did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, Send her away. Why did he not heal her in her first request? In fact, he didn't even answer her.
Maybe he just wanted to see how badly she wanted this and how strong her faith was.
Okay, that's one possibility.
This is at the time when Jesus was healing people, but then told them not to tell anyone what just happened.
Okay,
He
so
wasn't ready to reveal his holiness.
maybe he was off the clock. Maybe he was not working. Okay, yeah. Right, or maybe he wasn't at that stage in his ministry. Okay, you all are being kind to Jesus so far. How do you feel toward Jesus throughout most of this story? Any thoughts?
It's so out of character.
So out of character, yes, it's kind of confusing, right?
Well, he looks bad
He looks
because he's ignoring someone who's other, a Gentile, which is what we're going to talk about. But he's coming across as not being kind to everyone, not listening to everyone.
Not listening, right? So not being kind, not listening, not responding. Yes, to this woman who's labeled it from the beginning as an other. Yeah.
I'll be the contrarian.
Sure.
I think he was entirely in character because his calling from the Hebrew scriptures was to be Messiah for the Jewish people. And that's where he was to start. You can say that's where he would end, but this was his calling, and
yes,
he's in character.
He's Jewish, right?
Right.
And he's the Messiah fulfilled from the Jewish scriptures, right? Yes, thank you. Another perspective there. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? What difference do you think the detail that this woman is a Canaanite made to Jesus? We kind of have talked about that, but maybe to Matthew's original and increasingly non-Jewish audience. Would you read the story differently if you were a Jewish person hearing good news about Jesus versus a Gentile person or non-Jewish person? Probably.
I guess I don't have an answer to that, but I was thinking about the conversation with the disciples where they're saying, send this woman away.
Mm-hmm.
And is that a key to why? That it's like, don't let the children bother you. And he's like, well, no, let the kids come. So is there a lesson in that that says, I'm not sending anybody away? Did that have to happen first?
Mhm. Yes, because their response, I mean, the disciples came, so they seemed like they were coming as his backup and urged him, send her away, for she keeps shouting after us. He answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Yeah. So perhaps his initial answer was moderated, that he didn't send her away explicitly at first. Yeah. Do you find yourself identifying with this woman in any way?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Advocating for your child,
Advocating for your child.
advocating for your child and not letting the first person say, no, sorry, we don't do that.
Right.
You would, advocating is to continue pursuing what you hope
Right.
is the best for them.
Right. Yes. Yes. Most parents don't give up after a first no, right? Yeah. When it comes to the health and life of their child. Yes.
I think she was not going to be denied her faith. Like she was going to, and I put an example, going back to the sheep, like if someone told you this is what you need to believe and this is, she knew that she wanted to keep her faith and was not going to be denied it.
Right, right. So this, for her, from what you're hearing or seeing, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it was more than about healing her child. She had faith that there was a possibility. She believed that this man was God or was connected, could hold the power of God.
You know, that's an interesting question, because I wonder if she thought that as much as she knew he was a healer, and not necessarily where the healing came from, but that he obviously had a gift. I don't know, because I think different cultures, different ancient cultures lift up healers in different ways.
Yes.
And did she really, had she gone that far to think about, he's sent by God to do this, but there's this healer dude in the neighborhood and I'm gonna go find him.
Right.
So she was expressing faith, but we don't know in whom she had the faith.
Exactly.
But she had faith. That he
We
could
don't,
do
right,
something.
we don't know how much she knew about Hebrew scriptures, if anything.
Right.
But she does make this profound statement in verse 27. Yes, Lord, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. So what a powerful analogy. She kind of creatively takes his words and moves them in a different direction. Did you have something, Connie?
She calls him son of David, and if she had been following, even as a Gentile, she would have connected that this is supposed to be the Messiah coming from David.
Thank you. So you point out how she addressed him from the beginning. So Lord, and then son of David, which is a very Jewish title. Yes. So she knew something about what that would have meant and who he
And he had the power. She had faith that he had the power to save her child.
Yeah. Right.
Does Paul ever address this story?
This story specifically?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Just curious, I can't remember if he ever refers to it like in any of his letters.
Wouldn't it have been interesting if he had?
Yeah.
I don't know. I will make sure. I don't recall any story explicitly about that right now, but that's a good question.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
You know, that goes back to the comment about you do anything for your child. I don't care whose religion it is. They've got game. I'm in. Even if I'm not a believer, I'm willing to try that one if it will save my child.
Right, right. Yeah, that we will even cross maybe our own understandings, previous understandings of where God is located, where God's power might reside. Right, because surely she didn't come from a house that was practicing the worship of, the son of David or the Lord of David.
And this is kind of a personal thing, but whenever I hear somebody say on the news or anything, anyone who has children will understand. And I'm thinking,
I understand. I don't have kids, you know.
Right.
I'm a human being and I have empathy for anybody suffering.
Right, thank
So
you for
it's like,
that. Yeah.
well, it's just kind of,
Right,
yeah,
yeah, you don't have to be a parent to understand that.
suffering or whatever,
Yeah.
yeah. Or be willing to advocate. I'm not saying, I mean, it's great that parents do that, but I mean, they don't have to be a parent to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Diana.
Yeah, very true.
So AJ knows that this is the first woman who is quoted directly in Matthew's gospel. It's not fascinating. We're into chapter 15, so there have been quite a number of healing stories and encounters. Remember that Matthew is not the gospel writer who has the story about Mary and Elizabeth speaking to each other. That's in Luke. So for him, Matthew, this is the first woman who's directly quoted. How does the woman's pleading, you don't have to talk about Psalm 6 unless you've got your Bible in front of you, but what kind of significance do you see in this woman's story being recorded and told in Matthew's gospel?
Well, you gotta hear Psalm 6.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
Bring my Bible,
Thank you,
because
Bob.
it improves the looks of the place. Oh, seriously. Oh Lord, do not rebuke me or anger or discipline me. Be gracious to me. I am languishing. Heal my bones, or they are shaking with terror. My soul is struck. Save me, Lord. Deliver me for the sake of your steadfast love. Yeah, it does echo that.
Yes, yes. That unashamed pleading before the Lord, right? Why do you think this story is included in Matthew's gospel?
I don't know.
Yes.
Is it another example of Jesus' inclusion? Here, I wasn't aware that this was the first instance of a woman coming for healing, but a woman to approach a man,
Right.
and not be rebuked.
Yes, we haven't even gotten into that, but yes, this is awfully bold of any woman, right? Who wasn't already kind of.
And the others were saying, go away, send her away, because she's a woman? Because she's a nuisance like women are?
Yeah.
Were.
Excuse me.
That's refraining from comment. Yes, I mean, what the disciples say, she keeps shouting after us. They weren't really referencing that she was Canaanite or Jewish. She was just being annoying to them. Yeah. Right, so there's some element of that. She was kind of 2 points behind, not just of a different faith or maybe no faith, we don't know, but also a woman.
I guess I wonder if it's included because of the impact it had on him.
Right, as a Jewish author.
As a Jewish author, right? As one who's before his very eyes seeing an expansion, or maybe just the crack that allows for that expansion.
And I'm thinking timing wise, it's such a teaching chunk of scripture about Jesus. As Bob said, his first mission field was to the Jewish people, to those sheep. But this was written after Jesus' death and resurrection, right? And we're talking down the road. So to be able to look back and see the progression of the teaching here, that's why I think so many of these things, when Jesus says something that's so shocking, we get to thankfully look back and see the teaching elements of it. It's like, wait a minute, what does that say now? And this is in preparation for the fact that those same disciples that wanted to send her away were ones then that became missionaries, along with Paul and some others, to Gentiles.
Yes. Yes,
So they, you know,
absolutely.
they got to see Jesus still loving her, acknowledging her faith and healing.
Right, right. A real pivot point, not just for Jesus, but for those who follow him. Thank you. Kind of reflection question that we've been going back to in every session. At this point in our exploration of the story in Matthew, what would you ask Jesus if you had a chance to pose a question about this incident, this passage? What kind of question would you ask Jesus?
What was your feelings towards Gentiles?
Well, what were your feelings toward Gentiles? Yes. Great.
Why would you use the word dog?
Why would
There's
you use the word
Too
dog?
many negative connotations
Okay.
with that. And
Right. Yeah. How was that? How did that come to
that
you?
was negative even in the first century, still it
Right.
is.
Hard to put a positive spin on calling someone a, even though we love our dogs. Somehow it's also an insult still. Yeah.
But you know, dog spelled backwards is God.
That is true. You're right. There's a certain relationship there. Yeah, at least in the English language. Yes. Yeah.
Were you really here, did you really come, Jesus, to only talk to the Jews? Or were you, the fact that you went and spoke to this Canaanite woman, does that say that you saw your mission work as recruiting people that were not Jewish?
Yes. Was she seen to you at first as an exception because of her exceptional faith, or was this the kind of the change?
A broader reach.
A broader reach. Thank you. Yeah. Yes.
It's not answering the question, but I think Jesus always knew that he came for everybody. And that goes back to his birth. Who were the first people to come to see him? The shepherds, the lowest of the low. They were unclean. And the Gentiles, the wise men.
Right. Yes. And that's also in the Gospel of Matthew, right? So she's not the first Gentile to come and bow down and worship and recognize.
But it's that teaching moment for the disciples and everybody around, as well as the woman herself.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, good point.
Leah, I can't find the hand raising thing, but this is Joan.
Yes. Hi, Joni.
I think I would ask, what did you really say?
Oh, what did you really say?
Yeah, because she points out on page 78 in the book that, you know, there's many translations and that we need to be kind of aware and more interested in what translation we've been trying to learn from. And that's a part of that learning process, Judy.
Right. Thank you, Joni. Thanks for pointing that out. That yeah, we hold this current translation and the words from which it was translated, and yeah, we know that there may have been some different words spoken by Jesus. Yeah. Matthew recorded it this way. It's interesting. I'm gonna skip to our video at this point. We may go back to this other questions because I want you to hear from Amy Jill Levine. If you're in the back and hearing is hard for you, I'm inviting you to come up closer to the front. We are working on getting a better sound for our videos, but this may be a little bit hard to hear for those of you in the back.
Will putting the mic closer help?
Maybe. Yeah, we'll try to.
I think they did that last week.
Yeah, we'll try doing that. Thank you for that suggestion.
Heard that. That works.
There's a center of gravity that's a little higher than I thought there would be. Okay, all right, we're gonna try this.
That definitely works for us on Zoom too.
Okay, great. All right, thanks.
back in the early 1980s, and it seems so long ago, I was looking for a dissertation topic, and I really wanted to work on women in the Gospels. And the male faculty generally said that might not be a good topic, it's a little faddish. Why don't you work on justification in Paul? And I thought, that's been done. But one of my professors, a wonderful man named W.D. Davies, suggested to me that I might want to look at questions of Jewish-Gentile relations in the Gospel of Matthew. And it was a wonderful topic. So I wound up writing on the Gospel of Matthew's statement in chapter 10, where Jesus says to his disciples, don't go to the Gentiles, don't go to the Samaritans, go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. What could that possibly mean? Well, I eventually got the dissertation done and the book done. I wanted to call it Matthew in the Missionary Position, but the good faculty at Duke thought that was probably not a good title. What does it mean when Jesus restricts the mission and then at the end of the gospel says, make disciples of all the Gentiles? Why restrict a mission? Who are the lost sheep of the house of Israel? What has this restriction to do with the Great Commission? I had a dissertation topic, and the relationship between Jews and Gentiles, not only in Matthew, but through the rest of the New Testament, and indeed the first couple of centuries, has fascinated me ever since. Biblical scholars like to use technical terminology from the Latin, from the German, from the Greek. One of the terms that we use, and it's not just to make us sound smart, but it's a convenient shorthand, is the term exclusivity logion. So a logion is just a saying. Exclusivity, that's Jesus' statement about don't go to the Gentiles, don't go to the Samaritans. But the term exclusivity, at least to me, has a kind of negative connotation to it. I think about exclusive clubs in which you cannot become a member unless you have the right attributes or the right income or the right connections or the right politics. So perhaps there should be a better term than exclusivity logion. But even more than terminology, the statement has a sense of perhaps xenophobia. Is Jesus suggesting that God's rule is only for the Jews and too bad about that wider Gentile world? Why have this restrictive clause? And even the term restriction has problems. I think this statement is incredibly meaningful in terms of God's fidelity with the covenant with Israel and Paul's own statement about to the Jew first and then to the Gentile. Jesus appropriately begins with his own people, as one should when distributing the blessings of God. In a way similar to how we simply don't see the slaves throughout the gospel narratives, sometimes we miss the Gentiles, the pagans as well. And by Gentile, I simply mean somebody who's not a Jew and somebody who is not a Samaritan. Somebody who is part of that broader pagan world with all sorts of different religious traditions. But there are pagans, there are Gentiles all the way through the Gospel of Matthew, and it's fabulous. Matthew begins with Jesus as the son of Abraham, the son of David, the son of God. And Abraham starts out life as a Gentile. He doesn't become a Hebrew until God calls him, and he responds to that call. David had pagans in his background who eventually joined the Jewish people, in particular, the wonderful woman Ruth, who shows up in the genealogy. We have Rahab, the prostitute from Jericho, in the genealogy. Bathsheba isn't mentioned. Instead, Matthew mentions Uriah the Hittite. Pagans all the way through. And when we get to the birth story, here come the Magi, sometimes called wise men, but I don't think so. They're pagan astrologers, but they get the point about following that star. Matthew talks about Galilee of the Gentiles, which has finally seen a great light. Matthew tells us that Jesus heals the slave or the son of a pagan centurion. That's Matthew chapter 8. And then by the time we get to our Canaanite woman in Matthew 15, we've had Gentiles all the way through, and they have responded on the whole positively. Of course they would. Because the Jewish tradition itself recognizes that God is not just God of the Jews, God is God of the entire world. So when my students read the scriptures of Israel, what the church would call the Old Testament Jews would call the Tanakh, and they get this idea of Israel as a chosen people, a holy kingdom, God's own, they begin to think about Israel and then Jews as what the frozen chosen, thinking about Jews having God all to themselves and not sharing, but that was never, ever the Jewish view. When we talk about Jews as the chosen people, the next question should be, chosen for what? In the Jewish liturgy, on a Saturday morning, for example, when we read from the Torah in the synagogue, in the community, we say blessings before and after the Torah reading. And one of the blessings is in Hebrew, Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, who has chosen us from among all the peoples. But then the next line is, Shenatan Lanu et Torato, who has given to us his Torah. Jews are chosen to follow the Torah of God, which means the Pentateuch, as interpreted by the Jewish community. The Gentile nations are chosen for other roles. And for the New Testament, one of those roles, one of those major roles, is to become disciples of Jesus. And that's why at the end of the Gospel of Matthew, the Great Commission is, go make disciples of all the nations. The Greek could be translated, go make disciples of all the Gentiles, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey all that I have taught you. It's a very Jewish view, because for Jews, God is the God of the world, but the Gentiles will worship God in one way as ex-pagan pagans, and the Jews will worship God in another way, following all the commandments of Moses as understood by that community. Mark tells us in Mark's Gospel, chapter 7, about a Syrophoenician woman, a Greek Syrophoenician by birth. It's a very hoity-toity introduction. She has a demon-possessed daughter. Jesus has gone to Tyre. This is up in Lebanon. And he's in a house, and he just wants to be left alone. And she comes in, and she asks him to perform an exorcism for her daughter. And Jesus responds, let the children first be fed. It's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. It's not a good line. And even calling her a little puppy is not really helpful. Matthew, who I think is using Mark as a source, ratchets up the difficulty. Here we no longer have a Greek Syrophoenician by birth. We have a Canaanite woman. And the term Canaanite reminds us of that original population of the land of Canaan, the ones whom, according to the book of Joshua, the Israelite tribes displaced and replaced. And in the Gospel of Matthew, it's not let the children first be fed. No. First, the woman calls after him, Jesus, Lord, have mercy on me, and he ignores her. And she continues to cry out, and the disciples say, loose her, which is either send her away or perform the exorcism. It depends upon whether you think the disciples are acting in a helpful manner or not. And Jesus repeats that exclusivity logion. I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He's saying to this poor Canaanite woman, lady, you're not at my table. Lady, you're not part of my job description. And she kneels in front of him. Lord, have mercy. And he says, it's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Not even our first. You're a dog and you're undeserving. And the woman, rather than hurling an insult back at him, she says to him, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's hands. There's enough bread to go around. In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus says to the woman, because of your word, let your daughter be healed. And the woman goes home and finds her daughter in a bed, the demon having departed. In Matthew, that poor child could be standing right there. In Matthew, it's not because of the woman's word, it's because of her faith. I think that's Matthew's addition, because Matthew likes to talk about faith helping along with miracles. The more important thing here is, what do we do when Jesus calls this poor woman a dog? He's not calling her sweet little puppy. When I was little, my mother sometimes called me pussycat, which was weird because she didn't like cats. But I knew she meant that as an endearment. Calling someone a dog or a household pet is not in the Greek language an endearment. And nor is dog a typical term that Jews used for Gentiles. To the contrary, dog is an all-purpose insult. When Paul in Philippians says, beware of the dogs, beware of those who mutilate the flesh, he's not talking about general Gentiles. He's talking about people who want to impose Jewish law upon his Gentile believers in Christ. There's something marvelous about this statement. Jesus has insulted her, but she, instead of responding with insult, throws his words back at him. And you know what? Anybody who read the Gospel of Matthew would have known that was going to happen. Because back in the genealogy, we have Canaanite women like Rahab, the prostitute from Jericho, who is the one who remains faithful, while the spies whom Joshua had sent into the land, the spies go into Rahab's brothel. And they're not going into a brothel in order to check munitions or in order to check troop movements. There are other things one does there. The spies, unfaithful, Rahab the outsider, the Canaanite, the faithful one, who in effect teaches them a lesson. So since I know there's a Canaanite woman in Matthew chapter 1, when I get to chapter 15 and I have another Canaanite woman, I'm all set. She'll be the faithful one, and the Israelite, perhaps he needs a lesson from her. First century Judaism had a variety of views of what would happen when the Messiah came. And one major view was when the Messiah came, when the Messianic age broke through, the Gentiles, the pagans, would turn from their gods and their various pagan practices to worship the God of Israel. They would not convert to Judaism, because if they did, God would only be the God of the Jews, and God has to be the God of everyone. So in the Messianic age, Jews and Gentiles would worship together. In the Gospel of Matthew, the disciples actually don't engage in a mission. Matthew chapter 10 is a full mission discourse, but at the end, they don't go out as they do in Mark and in Luke. They simply follow Jesus. According to the Gospel of Matthew and to Paul and to the other Gospels, Jesus' cross, Jesus' resurrection marked the beginning of this new era, this new time. As Matthew puts it in chapter 28, the resurrected Jesus says, now all authority has been given to me. There's a change in my status. And because of that, because the Messianic age has broken in, go make disciples of all the Gentiles. And that's in fact what they did. And what we learn from this is that Jews remain Jews, but in the Christian mind, they begin to worship Jesus, but they keep their own tradition. And the pagans turn from their pagan practices and their pagan gods to worship the God of Israel. And everyone, Jew and Gentile together, as equals, celebrates in the Messianic age. And part of the good news of all of this is there's an affirmation of multiculturalism. You can still remain who you are as long as your worship is appropriately focused and as long as you can worship together.
Well,
Like her.
Anything stood out for you that struck you, either as something you really agree with or something that challenged you?
I think there's a movement toward inclusivity instead of exclusivity.
Okay. Sorry. So yeah, maybe a movement
Came for everyone.
toward inclusivity, that Jesus came for everyone. Yes, we're broadening that out. Yeah. Yeah, what else did you kind of hear or piqued your interest in what AJ said? Yeah.
So I had trouble with the, that part in that gospel where it talks, where he says that.
It's on the second side, top of the second side.
It says, yeah, it's not fair to take children's food and throw it to the dogs.
Yeah.
And she says, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. I have been having a lot of trouble parsing those two.
Uh-huh.
And she made it clear to me, which is, as she was saying, inclusivity. In other words, Jesus says, now I get it, that I guess his first statement was, well, I was here to help the Jews. And, you know, I'm not out there to help other people. The crumbs going to the dogs. And she's saying, yeah, but those dogs get to participate on or take advantage of or be part of what's being thrown out there because it can't stay contained.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's all she was there. She just wanted the crumbs.
She wasn't even challenging her place at the table. She was saying, but you, even if you're sitting under the table, you eventually get something to eat, right?
Yeah. So she was kind of calling them on it. You know, don't be snitchy.
Yeah.
And I think the disciples were doing that a little bit too when they told her when they said before that, you know, send her away because she's not part of our club. You know, she's not allowed to partake of what you're preaching to the Jews. And again, that was, you know, jealousy in a way. They just wanted to hold them for themselves.
Yeah.
And but you know, again, what she was saying, God's there for everybody, not just the Jews. So you know, Jesus wanted to just focus on the Jews. God wasn't going to let him do that.
Thank you. Yes. Bob, did you have a?
I say it's sort of like, Leah, you have been called to be the pastor to the lost sheep of Westminster. That's written on the Presbytery papers. You've been called to be shepherd of these sheep. But you're not going to turn away somebody from another tradition or no tradition. And you haven't. I mean, you ministered to other people outside of this congregation, this group of sheep. And fortunately, I don't think the elders, the session is going to say, send those people away.
Send those people away.
They're not of us. I think they've grown from the disciples.
We'd like to think we've grown from that. Yes. Thank you.
It's beyond the congregation.
Yeah. No.
Same as Jesus.
Right. What do you make of the comment? It was kind of in the middle of AJ, and maybe this is kind of playing with that too, Bob, about who a shepherd is for. AJ says Jesus appropriately begins with his own people, as one should, when distributing the blessings of God. How does this statement apply to the way in which you or we, the way our faith community distributes blessings? How does it apply?
Through our mission work.
Right. So we have mission work, and usually when we talk about mission work, we're not checking membership cards of those whom we're helping, right?
The moment for mission today.
Yeah, the minute for mission. Yeah, right. Our serving at the crossroads, our support of the clinic in Honduras. Yeah, we're not checking to see whether those who walk in that clinic are followers of Jesus or not, right? And yet it's a thoroughly Christ-centered ministry. Yes. Right. Yeah, Susan.
And this came up just the other day when I was in here. The women's retreat is limited to a certain number, but it's not just limited to members of Westminster Presbyterian.
Right. Yes.
Which is, you know,
yeah,
maybe the members are not happy with that if they can't get here.
Yeah, right.
But it was open to, and I've brought several friends in the past from outside the church, which is a way of introducing them to this church.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good example, and tough because we do have right now this I mean, it's a little bittersweet that we have a waiting list now for the women's retreat. We are capped at 70. That's how much we can do with our current facilitators of small groups and how comfortable our speaker is, that, you know, you kind of go beyond a retreat kind of feel when you're getting more than 70. So that was part of her request, and the planning team affirmed that. But it hurts to be number 80 on
Yeah.
that wait list. If you're a member, especially, you kind of feel like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm helping support this. But yes, you're right. That retreat's for anyone who needs to retreat and find God's word and some Christian community. Yeah. Thank you. How do we discern when and how to start distributing God's blessings to people who are not our own? How do we do that?
I think when you see the need.
When you see the need. Okay, so yes, need drives some of that. Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, sure. Others. It's a tough one. I mean, we know that Jesus didn't heal everyone in Mesopotamia in his own lifetime, right? So we know that our work is kind of always and forever incomplete. Any thoughts from our friends who are joining us online? This question.
I could be number 81.
81. Are you number 81?
Or 80.
Or 80. Are you on the wait list?
Yes.
Joni? Okay.
Just a little aside there when you were doing the numbers.
Yes, yes. No, it doesn't feel good to have that wait list stay a wait list. But we're also glad that there's been such a big response to both retreats. The men's retreat and the women's retreat now are on wait list. AJ says Jews are chosen to follow the Torah of God. The Gentile nations are chosen for other roles. It's an interesting statement. How does this understanding keep us from thinking about being a chosen people, whether the Jewish faith or the Christian church is the same as belonging to one of those exclusive clubs? And one of those exclusive clubs is just, you know, how do we not be a group of saying, okay, we've got our insiders, but, you know, we're kind of happy being made up of our current membership?
Well, I think we think that what we believe of Jesus being the Messiah, and the Jews are still waiting for the Messiah, makes us feel very exclusive. And I think when we look at AJ saying, you know, right off the beginning of this book, that she is Jewish and she's comfortable with the way that she worships God. I think we need to expand how we believe God came to us, because we believe that Jesus is God. But we believe that he's also the Messiah. So, I mean, I'm just riffing on the thoughts that I have about this. I think we need to be careful when we look at how we look at the Jews. That they are the chosen people of God, in that they were brought to their position by Abraham's faith. But his journey started before the law was given. I don't know. I just
yeah, thanks for your thoughts, Joni, on that. Yeah, and I don't want to ignore Carolyn or Paul. Do one of you have your hand raised?
Yeah, this is Paul.
Hi, Paul.
I don't interpret that AJ's comment negatively. You wouldn't expect Gentiles to follow the Torah. I think I take it to mean that Gentiles can follow something equally important. That's how I took it.
I agree, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's right. It's an interesting thing. And I appreciated AJ's comment about we're not following Jesus so that we can become people of the Torah. And we're not following Jesus so we can become Jewish like him. I mean but that was a debate in the early church, wasn't it? About what rules the new believers needed to uphold of the Jewish faith. Yeah. I don't want to miss somebody else. Any other comments online? Okay, thank you. How about this last question? How is being chosen a statement as much about responsibility as it is privilege? What do you hear in that sense of being chosen? What does that mean to you when you hear? Because we believe we are chosen. God calls us by name in Jesus Christ, and through the waters of baptism, we're claimed as God's own.
We were chosen for something, not just chosen to be a chosen person, or
Right.
chosen for a purpose. And our responsibility is to keep that, continue to learn, continue to see how we've been asked to serve.
How we've been asked to serve. So that sense of responsibility of chosen for service, for purpose. Thank you. Others? This might be a whole other class session, but how does believing God's blessings are abundant enough to share affect decisions that we make as people of faith make, and the actions they take even when resources are limited? How do we view God's abundance in the face of so much need, and at least to our view, some limited resources? So that's a big question. Maybe that's one for us to ponder as we go out into the week. How do we believe that God's blessings are abundant enough to share?
I still go by the thought that, and this has been said by many other people too, it's not a matter of scarcity, it's a matter of proper distribution. I think America has so much, and we can afford to help other countries. And other people just feel like, oh, it's America first all the time. And I think this is one planet, we're all in this together, and kind of thing, just be generous and trust that we'll still have enough.
Exactly. Yes.
It's easier said than done,
but that is, you're right, there's a trust, a certain level of trust.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Well, we're toward the end of our time. Let's just look at the last question. Who are the lost sheep? And in other places, they're termed the harassed and helpless of today. How might we be vocal and persistent like the Canaanite woman on their behalf? And are we bold enough to approach Jesus? Would Jesus commend us for our faith as he commended the woman?
We live in such a secular society now that I think there are a lot of lost sheep.
A lot of lost sheep, yes.
Whether we call them the unchurched or those who just have not developed faith or been exposed to it.
Right.
So there's a challenge.
Right, yes. And maybe with our perspective and our kind of ability to come alongside people change if we thought of lost sheep as the people who are the most harassed and helpless right now. The people who don't have a shepherd, who are just in the midst of chaos or loneliness, abandonment.
There's so many in that category. I mean, you think of the homeless, sexual trafficking.
Yeah.
It's just awful.
Right.
We'll go on and on.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, well, thank you all for your time today, for your deep study of these passages. We will go to our closing prayer. At this point, please join me as you are moved. Lord Jesus, you entrust us with good news. Send us from this time of study to share it in word and in action. Grant us tenacious faith, a persistent trust in your power, and voices loud enough to lift up for others whom the world too often chooses not to hear. Amen. Amen. Thank you all so much. And I hope you can join in next week for session 5, which is Outer Darkness. Outer Darkness. Where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. We're so inspired. So if you have a moment to study Matthew 5, that will help you prepare. Thanks to those joining us from home or from afar. It's good to see you. May the peace of Christ be with you.